want to take you back to the Republican National Convention, which is underway right now. In fact, a representative that we had on the program earlier today, Mike Waltz, is speaking right now on stage. And we want to give you some breaking news about former President Trump's vice presidential pick. I want to go ahead and bring in CBS News' chief Washington correspondent who's in Milwaukee, Major Garrett, to be with us. Major, what are we learning?
So a couple of things that are important as this afternoon plays out on the first day of the Republican National Convention. We're here in the Fiserv Arena as the Republican National Convention begins. They're going through some procedural maneuvers right now in preparation for Donald Trump being formally nominated through the delegate process here. That'll play out in the next hour, a couple of hours. But the delegates here are waiting for an announcement of the president's running mate. And we know two people have been notified within the last hour or so that they are not going to be former President Trump's running mate, Marco Rubio, senator from Florida, and sitting North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. Both were on the short list. Both had been vetted through the materials sent to the Trump campaign and were notified, according to our sources, directly today, like in the last hour and a half or so, that neither are former President Trump's pick to be his running mate. That leaves, of course, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance or someone else late added to the process. There is a lot of conversation, I can tell you, here this afternoon about Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin. No reporting on whether or not Glenn Youngkin will be the pick, but there is a kind of a conversation, a buzz in this arena about the possibility of that, intensified just today by a New York Times Siena poll showing former President Trump trailing President Joe Biden by only 3 percentage points in Virginia. Putting a state like Virginia on the map for the Trump campaign would fundamentally change the electoral calculus for both campaigns. That may be aspirational for some delegates here thinking about Virginia and Governor Youngkin. No hard reporting on that, but people I've talked to within the Republican Party here have heard that conversation. We'll see where it goes.
Of course, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, a fervent supporter, vocal supporter of the former president, avid on some of the cable shows, the Sunday shows. We know the former president is interested in somebody who can help with his message, also somebody who could carry on a presidency if needed. But Youngkin would be an interesting pick, Major, because while he has since been most definitely an ally of former President Trump during his own campaign, he did sort of distance himself.
He threaded the needle. That was the phrase most routinely applied to Glenn Youngkin. He made himself visible and went to all the right places in Virginia to identify himself generally with the Trump-influenced Republican Party in Virginia, but did not fully embrace it, did not use all of the most aggressive rhetoric, frequently part of the Trump messaging in Virginia, and prevailed over a formidable Democratic candidate, Terry McAuliffe, former governor of Virginia and a strongly backed Democrat, reversing a tide that very shortly before that in 2020, Joe Biden had won the state by, I believe, if my memory serves, 10 points. Glenn Youngkin won his governor's race by 4 or 5 points. That was a big swing. So Glenn Youngkin has proven himself capable in a state that had been trending blue of carrying a Trump-light message, if you will. J.D. Vance has a lot of things going for him, and he has certainly tried out aggressively on all television networks, cable and broadcast, to communicate to former President Trump that he's ready to go, and has overcome his early criticism dating back to 2016, very aggressive criticism of former President Trump when he was a candidate for the Republican nomination. They have patched all those differences up. Essentially, J.D. Vance, the Ohio senator, has said that was then, this is now. The movement is clearly former President Trump's. I need to get on board. I need to get over myself and those criticisms I had back then. So clearly, he is in the spotlight. Of the three most frequently mentioned leading into this convention, only J.D. Vance remains standing. Marco Rubio out. Doug Burgum out. There might be a surprise. Glenn Youngkin or someone else, we don't know, but I guarantee you the delegates in this arena are eagerly anticipating word. And after the delegate process to put former President Trump over the top and officially make him the nominee for president at this convention, the next thing that will happen is that name will be introduced, and I'm told by acclamation, the delegates here will approve whomever that pick is. We are to hear that right around the 4:30 hour Eastern time.
Major, what can you tell us about the former president's thinking? We know that Before the 2016 convention, the former president picked Mike Pence just days before. And we know, obviously, that the events over the weekend could have incredible bearing. Marco Rubio perhaps not picked because of the state residency issues with the 12th Amendment, saying a president and vice president can't both be on the same ticket from the same state. Of course, Trump would need Florida's 30 or so delegates. Doug Burgum, North Dakota, maybe not a state that could help him incredibly electorally. What can you tell us about Trump's thinking in this moment?
So right now it's opaque. I will tell you that. No one really has an insight into former President Trump's decision-making process. We know he has arrived at a decision. We just don't know who that person is. And I will tell you, over the weekend, things were moving in a certain direction, and they were at least paused for a moment of reflection based on the assassination attempt on former President Trump's life in Butler, Pennsylvania, Saturday evening. And there was, for a few hours, a sense that that might have increased the probability that Governor Burgum might be selected. And the reasoning behind that was former President Trump had said frequently that he wanted this pick to be someone who could take on the position, the burdens of president right away. And he always said, these are his words, not mine, that someone who had been a governor for at least one term and maybe even 2 terms would be well prepared from executive experience to step in should the worst happen. People thought maybe after Saturday that increased the probability for Doug Burgum. Turns out that's not the case. But that's why Governor Youngkin, a sitting governor, might factor into that. We just don't know exactly how the former president has resolved this. As far as Marco Rubio, the senator from Florida, no one in the Trump inner circle thought that the residency thing could not be resolved and resolved quickly. Marco Rubio could have easily found himself an apartment in Washington, D.C. as a sitting senator, claimed that as a residence, and made that probability very easy to take care of. Essentially, I've got an apartment in Washington, D.C. That's my residence. I no longer have a residence in Florida. Nobody really worried about ironing that out. Marco Rubio was considered for lots of other factors, and I would not suggest in any way that the residency issue was disqualifying. Everyone in the Trump inner circle said if that was the pick that the former president wanted to make, it could be easily resolved. That's not what's going to happen. So again, that puts J.D. Vance, the Ohio Republican senator, clearly in the spotlight, and potentially others.
As we continue to watch the events unfolding behind you on stage, where I believe the RNC chair is currently gaveling in, Michael Whatley. We're going to continue monitoring this. We are going to bring you the very latest developments here out of Milwaukee, including with special coverage at the top of the hour. But for now, we are going to take a short break.